One more week to go of OTAs. Good afternoon, everybody. A good Monday afternoon. June 3rd, 2024. This is, of course, the Southside Beat on DK Pittsburgh Sports. He's Chris Halicke. I am Corey Crisan. The Steelers did not practice today as scheduled. Instead, they went on a little field trip. Little class trip today to Kennywood.
Yeah.
The Steelers took. The social media teams have been putting out some photos, riding rides, playing some games, and a little bit of team bonding for the day.
Yeah, that's all. That was always one of my favorite. I'm seeing I just saw the pictures that they posted. That's funny. Yeah, we got some. Let's see, Peyton Wilson's there. Looks like Ogunjobi maybe.
A lot of the rookies are there.
Yeah, a lot of the rookies. I saw Beanie Bishop made a post, but definitely Russell Wilson and Justin Fields are there. But which, by the way, I don't think there's anything going on in Pittsburgh in which Russell Wilson is not there.
Yeah, really.
He seems to be everywhere.
Kenny Chesney concert, certainly on Saturday.
Yeah,
I was on the other side of the river at the Riverhounds match, which I'm glad I was. I'm glad I was. I'll stick to that side of the river while Kenny Chesney's going on. The reputation I think developed over the last several years for the tailgates precedes itself anymore. I think so.
Not as bad as Morgan Wallen at PNC Park. I don't think though.
I don't know. I think by now the Kenny Chesney crowds are pretty well known.
Was there a porta potty fight that went viral that I don't know about?
That's true. I don't know. I stayed away from all that action. Like I said, I went to the Riverhounds match, and that's the furthest towards the North Shore I went. So I stayed clear, and good crowd for the Riverhounds. 5,000 showed up to watch that match Saturday. They're doing really well with their crowds. They could be playing a little bit better, but onto the American football side again. Steelers on week.
Oh. Cutting out.
Microphone doing this.
There we go. It's back.
OTAs number 7. They spend it at Kennywood. The OTAs number 8, 9, and 10. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
Yep.
This week. And again, it's the final week of football in shorts. We're not expected to see Cam Hayward, as we haven't seen him the last couple of weeks. We are expected to see some of the people that have been there throughout this entirety of this OTAs process, this football in shorts period, the acclimation, if you will, of building the 2024 Steelers. And this week, I think, is going to be kind of the final touches on getting that process down before minicamp begins next week.
Minicamp is the final step ahead of training camp. Obviously, that's whenever everybody on the team is expected to be there. It's mandatory minicamp. So if Cam Hayward doesn't show up to that, that's when the first time in which you can be like, like, how serious is this contract extension? Yes, Damon does say in the chat, rest in peace to Larry Allen. Tragically passed away this morning. It sucks.
Too young.
But yeah. He's in his 50s, I think. It's just
too young.
But yeah, I mean, it's the final week of OTAs. There's always a day. We mentioned it last week. I think you mentioned it last week that it's the 10th day or one of the days of OTAs in which they don't really do anything. It's usually some sort of team bonding or something like that. And apparently today it was going to Kennywood. For whatever the reason is behind the destination that's chosen. I do kind of understand, especially around this time of year in which it's like, let's just have some fun together as a team. Understand that. So, yeah, it's fun to see the guys having fun, and then, they'll wrap things up this week in terms of OTAs. And then we're getting closer and closer, man. I just writing one of the thing I wrote yesterday on the site, 7 weeks away from training camp, but just typing that out, I was like, man, 7 weeks. Like, it's like for me, I'm like, I have to be there in 7 weeks. I'm like trying to sell a house and get up there. Like, man, I'm like, we really gotta get this house sold fast.
It can get overwhelming when you put it that way.
You
can get overwhelming, but
closing alone takes 30 days. So
yeah. I remember just yesterday we were talking about the Super Bowl. We were talking about
It
the
flies, man.
commercials. We were
It
talking
flies.
about getting set up for, the Senior Bowl. Just like yesterday, I was in Mobile, Alabama, and sharing an Uber with one of the other Pittsburgh reporters that were down there. Like, it's all just like yesterday. It flies, but it really does fly by. And certainly these last couple of weeks have flown by.
It's the longest off season, but it goes by so fast. And I don't know if that's just because there's so much that goes on during the NFL offseason and it makes it feel faster than it is. Maybe that's the reason why. Because like for me, like for example, the Stanley Cup Finals is about to start. It's not going to be over until near the end of the month, most likely. And then it's July. So you got all of July, August, and then training camp is in September for hockey. And so you got essentially 2 months in which the draft happens, the free agency happens, and then there you go. Like hockey's right back at it. But for some reason, that offseason feels way longer than just a couple of months or even 3 months. NFL offseason, man, you're talking about like for all the teams that don't make it to the Super Bowl, their season ends in January. And then they're not playing regular season football. I mean, even preseason football, not until August.
Yeah.
But for some reason, this offseason feels way faster than the number of months. It's just interesting.
Yeah, the way things have moved. And of course, the Steelers have been very busy this offseason trying to rebuild, retool, of course, overhauling their entire quarterback room, rather. That'll always expedite things. And, for as much as we talk about what the Arthur Smith offense could be, what Russell Wilson could be, what Justin Fields could be, etc., that all theorizes into one little vacuum, and that comes out, in a 4-month stretch over the course of, August again until January. And the rest of it is talk. The rest of it is shaping things up in business. And the business end of it has kept us pretty busy, I think, this offseason, as it usually does. But even this offseason, more than last, I feel, a lot more speculation, a lot more clarity on the Steelers needing to make moves, on the Steelers needing to address some things, because that playoff drought is getting longer. Mike Tomlin is entering or close to entering a contract year. It's a really interesting transition period within the Steelers organization, and especially and now I guess you could call it second trial in this run of quarterbacks in the post Ben Roethlisberger era too.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like as you mentioned, yes, it's another season. Last year was another season of, lack of playoff success. That this team hasn't won a playoff game since the 2016 season. It was technically January of 17, but It was the 2016 season. Like that's a long time ago. And I pointed out in our Steelers feed, and I don't like basing things just based off of history and historical years and stuff like that, but it is really interesting to me. I went back, because I remembered, obviously whenever it was brought up multiple times during the draft, even post-draft, that it's been 50 years. Like this year is the 50th anniversary of the 1974 draft, which is the best draft class of all time. Also, that season ended up producing the Steelers' first ever Super Bowl win. And so I was like, oh, wow, that's cool. And then my mind went racing because, I'm a nerd. And I was like, oh, this is also the 30th anniversary of 1994, which was one of the more underwhelming Steelers seasons in terms of, I guess, underachieving. Obviously, that was the terrible loss to the Chargers in the AFC Championship, where they were 13-point favorites. Blew it and everything. And so I started going back. I'm like, well, what else happened in the fifth year of each decade since then? And 1984, it was the only conference championship appearance, which is the furthest the Steelers got in the entire 1980s. And then 2004 was Ben Roethlisberger's rookie year. The Steelers go 15-1, which is the franchise best record. And then 2014, 11-5, first round exit. Okay. But then also Big Ben won his first passing title. Had a 2-week stretch, which was like an all-time. He had like nearly 900 yards passing with 12 touchdowns. So I was like, man, maybe something is in store for 2024. Like, I don't
If you believe in that kind of thing, yeah, no doubt.
And that's why I prefaced that with like, we're not just going to base this off of history, but
not superstitious, but a little
stitious. There you go. To quote Michael Scott. How far are you in the office, by the way?
Where am I? I was just about to bring that up. Where am I? I passed up Scott's tots. Very cringy.
Boy.
Very cringy.
Worse than dinner party, in my opinion. Yeah.
As far as cringeworthiness, yes. Pam just had the baby. Pam had the baby. She didn't just have the baby. She had the baby. I'm trying to think of what episode I ended on. They already sold. If I'm spoiling anything for anybody, sorry. The show's been
by this time, man. The show ended in 2013.
It's not a spoiler, you know. It's already been sold. I'm trying to think. The company's already been sold to what's it called?
Sabre,
yeah. But I'm trying to think of the exact episode. It's before Andy takes over. I know that happens.
Well, yeah.
So I'm not there quite yet.
You're not even until the point that where Michael leaves. So
no, I'm in season 6 still. So we're making progress on The Office. Hold on, I need to pull this up. Teresa says, I don't want to wish my life away, but I can't wait for June to be in the rear view. It's June 3rd. We just started. June.
June is it's one of those months. It's not my favorite month either. It's just like, well, first off, it's a summer month with no holiday other than now I'm in Juneteenth now. But I look forward to 4th of July. Like 4th of July is my favorite one, mainly just because I like to eat. I used to like to blow stuff up. I don't really like doing that anymore. But now I just like to have an excuse to eat and swim and stuff like that. And
don't we all?
And especially this year, I'm also ready for June to be over because I'm ready for this entire process of selling the house and everything to be over and buying a house up there to be over. So I'm with you there, Teresa, a little bit. Like I'm ready for June to be over just because I'm ready for this entire situation, which, by the way, really quick, just to kind of give an update on that. Chris asked earlier, any nibbles on the house yet? We have had 2 different potential buyers that were deciding between our house and a new build, and they both went new build, which I understand. It's also very, very difficult. It's very competitive down here with where I live because they're building new houses like crazy, and we're trying to compete with that. And plus, with all these new builds, they're like, hey, you can, if your credit score is this, you can have this house without putting any money down, blah, blah, blah. And it's hard to compete with that. So we're trying, man. We're trying. Trust me.
Yeah. If some of you are looking at this and say, okay, we're 15 minutes into the show, why haven't they talked about Steelers OTAs?
We have talked about Steelers.
We have a little bit, but that's because there's really nothing going on. In terms of Thursday, obviously went down. We had a show Friday. Nothing happened literally Steelers-wise between Friday and today. And today they're out, playing carnival games and riding roller coasters at Kennywood.
Wow.
So there's not really much happening. Now, I'm glad this was brought up by Steeler Lee in our chat. Who says, was I the only happy one to see Justin Jefferson get paid? So now the Bengals have to overpay for their wide receivers. I think if there's anything that's newsworthy and noteworthy to talk about that we can kind of relate to the Steelers here and localize it, it's Justin Jefferson getting paid by the Vikings. Obviously, the Bengals and what they're going through with respect to at least T. Higgins, who has not been a big fan of that franchise tag that they put him on, to say the very least. And look, the Steelers in that wide receiver market, we talked about that June 1st cut date, seeing what options are out there, what the Steelers could potentially do. I think that the Justin Jefferson contract, the extension, I can't say it sets the market or it sets the price that the Steelers might have to pay. But at the same time, anytime something like that happens, the other teams have to kind of follow suit in some way. And when you go pay for a guy like Justin Jefferson, like the Vikings did, of course, I can't really say team-friendly deal when you look at everything, but also he got paid what he deserved as one of the best, if not the best wide receiver in football.
Mm-hmm.
So, when we talked about with respect to the Steelers getting Patrick Queen, for example, and talking about paying top dollar for linebackers and getting, I believe, in the top 5 in the market as far as AAV is concerned, and really putting forward that kind of money, that's what the Vikings did with Jefferson. And now the Steelers, if they want to go get, using these 2 names, Brandon Ayuk or DK Metcalf, you kind of have an idea now, at least a little bit of an idea of what they're going to have to pay to get them.
Yeah. I actually just put something up on DKPittsburghSports.com. Looking at how that contract does impact the Steelers, because it does, and it really impacts the entire league, because a contract like that resets everything for, not obviously for receivers, but really for any player that really kind of hits the superstar status, because it's, I mean, $35 million a year. That's the highest contract in NFL history for a non-quarterback. So yeah, of course, those receivers, Brandon Ayuk and CeeDee Lamb and T. Higgins and whoever else is looking for a contract are salivating right now. They're just like, man, thank you, Justin.
Yeah.
But the Steelers, it impacts them because now, okay, the 49ers, okay, what do they do with Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel? Do they acquiesce to Ayuk wanting to get possibly $30 million, north of $30 million a year? If they do, can they afford Ayuk and Samuel? I don't think so. So do they acquiesce to Ayuk and part ways with Deebo? How do the Steelers play a role in that? Do they go hard after trying to get Deebo in a trade? Or do the 49ers say, you know what, Brandon Ayuk's not worth that money, and so the Steelers are willing to trade for whatever the 49ers want to recoup? And then the Steelers are like, we'll take him for, if it's for the right price, we'll take him for a season, see if he helps us this year, and let him go hit free agency. We'll see. I mean, I don't know, but either way, this impacts what the Steelers do, especially now that we're on the other side of June 1st. And yes, you can make trades and make cuts with a post June 1 designation, so you didn't have to wait until after June 1. But you wait until after June 1st. Teams that are possibly waiting to trade for receivers or acquire those guys maintain their leverage if they just wait. Which I think is why you've seen the Steelers. We saw it play out with Justin Fields. From the time that the rumors and everything started about the Steelers reaching out to the Bears about Justin Fields to the time that trade actually happened, you saw patience from Omar Khan, and you'll see more patience with this situation too. So, and some people are debating, would you rather have Deebo Samuel or Brandon Ayuk? Teresa's like, I don't want Deebo. I'd rather have Ayuk. I think anybody would rather have Ayuk because of age, because of for a number of reasons. But if you're talking about costs, because the other side of this, when it comes to Justin Jefferson, is the Steelers also have to consider possibly paying George Pickens. Because he only has 2 years left on his rookie deal, so you don't have to pay him now. But he just put up 1,140 yards in Matt Canada's offense when the offensive coordinator got fired midseason, and was subpar quarterback play. That's the nicest I can put it. Subpar quarterback play. Just put up 1,140 yards with those circumstances. Now he's going to have a better offensive coordinator who has a track record of having success at the NFL level as a coordinator. And with, even if they get average quarterback play out of Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, average. I'm not talking about good. I'm not talking about great or elite. Average. You'll probably see George Pickens put up even better numbers. And so then you're talking about, okay, what do the Steelers have to pay George Pickens? So you have to consider those things along with, do they trade for a guy right now for Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, Courtland Sutton, T. Higgins, any of these guys? So yes, this Justin Jefferson contract does have a bigger ripple effect on the Steelers than you might think on the surface.
Yeah. Look, and already talking about George Pickens, I understand value as far as what he is to that offense. I think that's so curious to see how this quarterback situation works out and how subsequently George Pickens benefits from it. Because if Russell Wilson or Justin Fields, whoever it is, most likely Wilson, comes in and is effective, and Pickens has a better season than he did last year, then okay, maybe he has some merit to ask for a little more money. But if the quarterback play is not that great and Pickens' numbers are the same or, God forbid, decline, then where does George Pickens go from there? Does he say, hey, listen, you gave me 2 quarterbacks in 3 years. Actually, 3 quarterbacks in 3 years. Actually, more like 5.
Could I would say, because he's had Kenny Pickett, Mitch Trubisky, Mason Rudolph already.
Yeah.
At some point, and honestly probably had his best games with Mason Rudolph.
Yes.
And then now he's going to have either Russell Wilson or Justin Fields. Most likely, good chance he has both of those guys at some point throwing passes this season, whether it be because of injury or whatever the reason is. It's George Pickens is going to be a guy like you have to begin to think about that now. Like you really, really have to. Like, yes, the actual extension talks don't have to start happening until next summer, because that's typically the time in which the Steelers like to start addressing it before they go into the final year of their contract. That's typical of a lot of teams, but specifically for the Steelers, that's what they do. And so you don't have to wait until you can wait until next summer, but if you wait until next summer, you're also running the risk where, like I said, if the offense is better, it should be just because Arthur Smith is an upgrade over Matt Canada. And then, like I said, even if they get average quarterback play, there's a good chance that George Pickens, since he's the top dog in this group, there's no denying that. He's the top dog, and if he stays healthy, there's a good chance he puts up some big numbers. We're talking 1,500 yards possibly if he's the top guy. Mm-hmm. That's not a far-fetched number. And if he puts up 1,500 yards and 7 or 8 touchdowns, you're talking about, Pro Bowl season possibly, maybe even pushes it if the numbers get a little bit better for like second team All-Pro, something like that. It's very, very possible. He's talented enough to put up those numbers in the right offense with the right quarterback.
Yeah, and keep in mind, they'll have to pay a quarterback next offseason too, regardless of how that comes. They're going to have to pay somebody to play quarterback next year. So, there's going to be way more domino effects than just George Pickens.
Yes.
But, I mean, talking about that in relation to Justin Jefferson, like, again, that's top of the line. That's huge money. That's going to pay top dollar literally for a wide receiver. And a lot of teams are not doing that. But there are teams that are putting out money for not just one, but 2 wide receivers.
Yeah.
2 of the top 8 salaries for wide receivers in the NFL based on annual value, the Eagles are paying them and the Dolphins are paying them. Mm-hmm. So that's 4 out of 8 right there. Half of the top 8 are getting paid by 2 teams. The Lions just paid Amon-Ra St. Brown. The Titans are paying Calvin Ridley $23 million and DeAndre Hopkins $13 million. Obviously, the Buccaneers are paying Evans and Godwin a lot. They're gonna the Bengals are gonna have to pay Chase pretty soon, and they're gonna pay Higgins. So teams are ponying up now for top dollar on wide receivers.
That Calvin Ridley contract, to me, like, might even have a bigger effect on the Steelers having to pay George Pickens than Justin Jefferson, in my opinion. $23 million a year for Calvin Ridley. I'm sorry, if you're asking me, which receiver do I want? If I know I have a good quarterback, if you're asking me, would I rather have George Pickens or Calvin Ridley? I'm sorry, I'm taking George Pickens. Like, to me, he's got the higher ceiling. He's more of a freak than Calvin Ridley is. If I have a good quarterback, I would much rather have George Pickens than Calvin Ridley. And so like I said, if George Pickens puts up any kind of season that could be defined as a big season, monster season, whatever you want to say, however you want to define it, whatever adjective floats your boat, like, you're probably looking at having to pay him north of that, possibly, especially if Calvin Ridley goes out and doesn't do well in Tennessee. Which, shoot, man, Will Levis, Mason Rudolph, not trying to take any shots at Mason Rudolph or Will Levis. Those guys could be good, and maybe Brian Callahan unlocks some things in Tennessee, but I don't know. $23 million a year for Calvin Ridley. I remember that's the contract. Like $35 million a year for Justin Jefferson. Okay, I mean, he's the best receiver in football, but Calvin Ridley, $23 million a year. Come on, man.
Okay, here's a good question.
That's a lot. Yeah.
Here's a great question from Biad, and while I have the salaries up, average annual total, all that for wide receivers, Biad asks, who is a $10 million wide receiver? Here are some names. Okay, making $11 million. I'll do you up one. Okay, $11 million this season. Alan Lazard from the Jets, Jacoby Myers from the Raiders, Brandon Cooks from the Cowboys is making $10 million. So is Mike Williams from the Jets. Those are literally $10 million wide receivers right now. Moving down a little bit on the list, Marvin Harrison Jr.'s rookie contract is about $8.8 million. Juju Smith-Schuster is making $8.5 million. Now they're not going to pay.
Juju, man.
Yeah. Adam Thielen is making $8.3 million. Curtis Samuel got $8 million average annual from the Bills. And then just names down the list. This is like in the 7.5 to 7 tier. Jawan Jennings of the Niners, Robert Woods, Malik Neighbors, of course, rookie. Hollywood Brown got $7 million. So those are the names. Those are the values. That's what's getting paid around the league. Now, obviously, the drop off from Jawan Jennings to Brandon Ayuk is pretty steep, talent wise. So if you want one of the top guys, you got to pay the top guys the top dollar. That's just how this works.
Yeah. And which again, like if the Steelers are going to commit that type of money to George Pickens, maybe they don't trade for, a Brandon Ayuk or try to get one of those guys in which they'd have to pay a lot of money. Maybe Cortland Sutton makes a lot more sense if Denver's willing to part ways with them. It's interesting to see how this is all going to play out because there's going to be some teams that I think eventually give in. If I had to bet, I would say the 49ers eventually work something out with Brandon Ayuk.
Yeah.
That's what I would guess. But then again, what's the fallout from that? If they do that, do they trade Debo and trade away he has 2 years left on his contract. So, who gets Debo for the next 2 years if that happens? If the Bengals aren't going to pay T Higgins because they got to pay Jamar Chase too. So like what's going to happen with T Higgins? And I highly doubt the Steelers would be involved in that because I don't see a universe in which the Bengals are willing to trade a good receiver to a division rival, especially the one they probably hate the most.
They're not going to do that.
No.
Absolutely not.
To switch to the defensive side real quick, Mike asked a good question earlier. He says, hey guys, why do you think that it is that we never hear anything about Deshaun Elliott like we do about Dante Jackson? Is it because safeties don't draw as much attention? He's one of my favorite additions. I think honestly, it's a really good point. And actually NFL.com recently did something where it's like the most underappreciated players on each roster. And the player named for the Steelers was Deshaun Elliott. So that makes a lot of sense, because Mike, he's honestly one of my favorite additions of the offseason too, especially for the cost, because it wasn't a lot of money, and he's a guy who can fill a lot of different needs. He's versatile. He's solid at just about everything. There's not any true weakness in his game. He's not quite like really, really good at one thing, but he's also not bad at almost anything. And so, yeah, it is a really good addition. And I think the Steelers will benefit from it. I think that's a good running mate for Minkah Fitzpatrick. And I just kind of wonder how DeMonte Casey plays into all this now. But my chalk talk, which is going to go up tonight, is actually going to focus on something that Deshaun Elliott's really good at, and that's tackling. He definitely helps the Steelers' overall ability to tackle on defense. And I think that's something that fans are going to appreciate this season for sure.
Right. I mean, I just haven't gotten a chance to speak to him, quite frankly. Caught up with Ryan Watts, caught up with DeMonte Casey, haven't heard from Minkah Fitzpatrick or Elliott yet. DK could tell you I have been efforting Van Jefferson for I think 2 weeks now. I'm pretty close to. Been efforting Van Jefferson, but sometimes those just don't work out. So
yeah.
Thursday, if you read it on DKPittsburghSports.com, really good takeout for Miles Killebrew on the new special teams rules. If you have not read that yet, please go ahead and check that out. Really good insight on the new kickoff rule. We talked about that on Friday. Nick says, is Julio Jones signed anywhere? Don't know, don't care. No. No, this isn't 2013. No. Moving on. Next. Will Burt allow Najee to dodge the media for another week? Here's the thing. Najee is not dodging anybody because Najee Harris does not have to give a press conference. It's OTAs. It's voluntary. Yeah. He technically doesn't have to be there, and players are not obligated during OTAs, during voluntary answers, during voluntary periods to answer questions from anybody, from media. They don't have to make themselves available. There's no rule on that. So
and plus the one thing about Najee is every single time, whenever he was a captain, he never he did his duties when it came to talking to the media. Even last year, now I wasn't there last year, to cover, but he wasn't a captain last year, but still spoke with the media on a, I guess, semi-regular basis, if that's fair to say. If he's a plus, okay, like right now, there are no captains for 2024. So nobody is really obligated to speak to the media. We'll probably see him talk, before training camp, like that report day when all the guys are showing up and everything like that. Like he'll probably talk then, and then he'll probably talk at training camp. But then really those guys, until captains are selected, they're not really going to be mandated, like you have to address the media.
They're not going to be chomping at the bit to get in front of a microphone. Russell Wilson might. He was generous with his time on Thursday.
He has been everywhere. Like I think I put a comment or replied to somebody on our feed, and I was like, man, you might legitimately question some aspects of his game, but man, his PR team is on point. He knows doing everything on the surface to make himself look good, man.
He knows how to play that game.
Oh,
for certain.
Man.
All right, so the way this week works is Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday are the OTAs again. Same time as last week, so relatively speaking, from about noon until 1:50 to 2:00 p.m., depending on when they feel like getting out. We will do our program at 4 p.m. tomorrow and Wednesday, just because by the time locker room closes, it's almost impossible to get in front of a microphone and sit down. At least for me, Chris can obviously do what he wants. But
the day that we do the Ramon show, or the day the Ramon show is going, we won't do a show. Yeah,
we won't have a show. So that's either going to be Wednesday or Thursday. I'll have to get with DK on that, but so we'll be back tomorrow 4 p.m. for sure. Tomorrow 4 p.m. Right here on YouTube live on DK Pittsburgh Sports Steelers, and then of course later in podcast form. You can find those on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify. Free to download. Please like, please share, please subscribe. Those go way further than you imagine. Here on YouTube as well. Please subscribe if you haven't. What that does, and if you leave a like on this video or any other videos that we have, that helps get us to the top of other people's algorithms. So people who are not subscribed to DK Pittsburgh Sports Steelers, that might be Steelers fans, can find it at the top of their recommended. That's how this whole thing is working now. So by you leaving a like, it gets more fans in here, gets more interaction in here, gets more talking in here, and it becomes a whole lot better for everybody. So we appreciate all of that. We appreciate you. He's Chris Halicke. I'm Corey Chris. We'll talk to you tomorrow, 4 p.m. Eastern, right here on DK Pittsburgh Sports on the Southside Beat. Cheers, everybody. Have a great day.